And we are on chapter 29 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We've only got about a half a page to go before we're finished with it. And then we'll jump into chapter 30, which is the Master in Various Moods. And that would be spiritual moods, not just when he was cranky and when he was happy and when he was. All right, so we're starting in. There's been a conversation going on about God with form and God without form. And this is always a big question. I'm always a little bit surprised by it. Um, I guess just because my disposition accepts the idea perfectly fine, like there's no trouble, God with form or God without form. Yes, of course, God is God. He does not obey the limits of my thought or mind. So why wouldn't that be true? But does anybody have a question about that, or is it hard for someone to? We're on the last page of chapter 29, uh, Sarah. And does anybody have questions about that God with form, or is that difficult to accept for some reason? It's totally fine. Ramakrishna gives us lots of room. He
Oh,
says
yeah,
you can believe it, or you can believe both sides of it, or you can choose
sure.
one or the other.
That's
But
what Asheshananda said. Yeah, yeah, that's been maybe because I was also raised Episcopalian. I don't know, but yeah, God with that hasn't been an issue, at least for
yeah,
me, from him.
yeah. I just
I don't.
he has to talk about it quite a bit. I guess maybe at that time in Calcutta it was a bigger question for people because I haven't really found too many people that have a problem with it, unless they're fundamentalists of any type of religion. Then you run into those issues, idolatry and whatnot.
I think also, Maharaj, that as far as my little knowledge goes, most of India believes in God with form, like, and with Brahmo Samaj came the God without form idea, which
Right,
was very new.
right.
And so it perhaps created some kind of a confusion or in people's minds, it would have been a hard thing to take or
Uh-huh.
because I mean, when in India, most of people worship with form, whether it's Shiva or Durga or Rama or Krishna or,
Right.
until I came to know Advaita, I didn't hear of God without form.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess they would have caused quite a stir because they didn't just say God without form, they said only God without form.
Right.
So they were negating the idea of God with form, the Brahmo Samaj, in that religious movement around Thakur's time, around Ramakrishna's time there. So, all right.
Just
Well,
a
they're having,
question. Let
yes.
me just ask a question. So I have no problems about God in some sort of a subtle form, but I have a problem about the God in a human form. So, um, so can you elaborate maybe a few sentences about it?
Yeah.
Is it something that um, yeah, there are some groups, people who believe that their teacher is a God in human form.
Right. Yeah, there's this idea of the incarnation, which is just about as old as the Vedanta, where God has been manifesting herself, himself, throughout the eons, in his purest form, as an avatar, as an incarnation. And so that would include people like Rama and Krishna and Buddha and Jesus, Ramakrishna, Holy Mother. That and what that is, it's not that, I mean, God as the absolute unchanging is infinite. But that infinite doesn't have a measure, doesn't have a size. So it's not like God has to squeeze himself, actually gather all of himself up and put himself in a human body. That could not happen because everything is God. And so he'd have to put the earth in that body and he'd have to put all the planets in that body. I mean, everything everywhere and beyond would have to go into that body. So it's not, that's not the way to think about it. It's the way to think about it is, um, God, God, the absolute unchanging, you can think of as a divine principle. he's not a noun, or that's not a noun. Not a verb. There is no action, no change there. So that's a divine principle of Satchitananda, pure love, pure wisdom through pure being. It gets activated when it manifests, when it steps into the world of Shakti, when when God sees herself or himself as a particular, then the whole universe manifests in response to that idea. And if you think of God just simply putting his finger into the water, like imagine that this dimension is underwater. And so God, who's presumably somewhere above that water, just sticks his finger in, right, and uses that finger to communicate with us and to teach all of us. And incidentally, we all look like fingers in the water. And so he sticks just a finger in there. And what an incarnation is it's not that it contains all of God, it's that it is God's mask of manifestation through which he will act in the most directly true way all the time through that manifestation. So all of us are ego driven. We've developed this sense of ego that's based on a body mind, and we express our God-like nature through that egoism. So it comes out all messed up. It comes out all distorted. Lots of selfishness, lots of anger, jealousy, lust, all of those things, because that's how the thoughts of God are arranged when presented by a body mind, by someone who thinks that they're a body mind. With an incarnation, God knows that he's not that body mind. And so everything that an incarnation says is what God would say, without the distortions of egoism, without the distortions of separateness. And so it's the clearest manifestation of God in human form. And he does that purely to give us a handle to grab onto. The formless God cannot be conceived of. And when I say the formless God to you, if anything comes to your mind to describe that, it's wrong. There is no form of God. He has either no attributes or all attributes. It's not an answerable question because there's one without a second, so there's no one to study it. There's no one to know it. And so God without a second has either all attributes, all potential attributes, or none of them. And it really depends on how you want to look at it, because it would be the same, right? Because if someone has all attributes, you can't use any attribute to describe them, because everything and anything that you would say would be true. And so that could be God, the converse is that God is that formless. There are no attributes to that formlessness. And so how will you describe that? Right? And if you give it personality, if you give it qualities of emotion, if you give it loving, God is loving. If you give him anything that's a verb, or give him anything that's an attribute of any kind, you've limited him, or her, or that, or it, or all of them. You can't.
Right. So God incarnate is called avatar, right? So avatar is possessing some sort of a human body, maybe not the same density as ours, or I don't know.
No, it would be the same as ours, but it would be of a very pure nature, which makes it manifest slightly different from us.
So without sankharas, without karmic
Right.
karmic,
He has a slight bit of karma, a slight bit of veil, because you have to have some impurity in order to manifest. Like Ramakrishna says that all pearls are impure because all of them needed that grain of sand in the oyster in order to form. And so God needs that grain of sand in order to manifest as a pearl, as a human body. And so he does have a sense of me and mine, but that veil is so thin that it's his choice to keep it or let it go. He's not beholden to it like we are. We don't have that choice because we're just so enamored.
So due to this very thin veil, then consequently, God manifests or avatar has some sort of limitations, right? Obviously.
Yeah, so an avatar, God takes on our limitations in order to present himself to us in an understandable way or in a higher way than what we could do without any help. Where he can come and teach, he can come and talk about what God is and what that nature is and what the universe is and how to realize this and how to come to this knowledge. And he talks from a space of absolute experience, knowing that it's for him, it's not philosophy or religion, it's manifestation. And it's like what Ramakrishna says. Ramakrishna gives a really great way of thinking about it. He says, God, when somebody asked him who he is, what are you? He says, I'm a whole through which God can be seen, right? So his body mind is kind of a hole through which God can speak and act in the world. But the body mind of Ramakrishna, there's nothing there extraordinary. What's extraordinary about Ramakrishna is not what he was, but what he was not. He was a pure soul that had no identifying attachments or minimal identifying attachments, so that when he spoke, there was no egoism in it. There was no body mind conditioning in it. There was no history, his personal history in it. There was only truth, only as if you had asked God directly that question. God answered that question directly, purely through the moment, without any motivation on Ramakrishna's part, without any expectation of result on Ramakrishna's part. He
But
was just,
Ramakrishna wasn't an avatar, right?
what's that?
He wasn't an avatar, was he?
Well, that depends. He leaves that up to the individual. He does not find it important that you say he is or not, but the order and in general holds him to be an avatar, holds him to be an incarnation of God. But an incarnation in three, as it were, that this time God incarnated in three bodies simultaneously, Vivekananda, Holy Mother, and Ramakrishna. And each one of them is a complete aspect or a complete manifestation of God through God as woman, through God as teacher, through God as guru. In the three of those personages together. And so it's not that you're going to get the whole thing there. God could manifest as 1,000 people and still not be fully manifested. 1 billion people and not be. I mean, that's actually what's happening. All of the universe for how many tens of billions of years now has been manifesting God, and it's still not finished. But never will be finished. Because God is infinite in that sense. But yes, it's not a statement that God squeezed into a single human form and that was God. It's that God manifested as a human form with no baggage, so that only truth was presented through that person. That person had no ego self separating himself, binding him and kind of distorting the
But
message.
the physical body, physicality of the incarnation presents obviously limitations, right?
Yes, yes, yes. There are limitations, not quite as many as what we have. And actually, we don't have those limitations either. But because of the faith, the power of our faith, the power of our selves is quite as significantly less. But Vivekananda says that really the only difference between us as an incarnation is in the level of power. Like you and I, we just don't have enough power. When we die, we're going to be forgotten. When an incarnation dies, they're never forgotten. Because the powerful manifestation of truth that they were, a manifestation of love that they were, will echo forever through the creation, right? And so that's why we know all of these avatars going back before people were even counting time, almost. So in that sense, but yes, he has limitations in that he identifies, manifests himself through a body mind, and that body mind will have a story, and that body of mind will have a place and a location and a time that he happened in. And, he's susceptible to pain. He's susceptible to ups and downs that we all go through. But again, for him, it's a play. He can stop anytime. He can pull his head out from behind the mask anytime and not be affected by it. That's why Ramakrishna was able to go into deep samadhi, which means he was going all the way to Nirvikalpa samadhi. And because he was an incarnation, he could come back into the body and manifest through that body as a personality again. Whereas you and I, if we do have samadhi, we don't come back from it. We won't be able to pull ourselves back from it, right? And so that's the unique ability of an avatar. That and their ability to remove karma from people. They have the ability to absorb karmas because they don't produce any karmas of their own. So they have the ability to absorb karmas for people. Is that helpful?
Very, thank you.
All right. So Adar is talking, and he's ratting out Shivanath Babu here. He says Shivanath Babu does not believe in God's forms. And Vijay says, well, that's his mistake, pointing to the master. As he says, the chameleon assumes different colors now this color, now that. Only the man who lives under the tree knows the animal's true color or true nature, right? And you all know that story. There was 5 men see an animal on a tree next to a sadhu, and it's a chameleon. So one guy saw it and it was blue, and one guy saw it and it was green, and one guy saw it was red. And then one guy said it had no color at all, which I don't know what he was seeing. But anyway, they were all arguing about what this chameleon looked like. And then they went and talked to the sadhu who lives there. And the sadhu says, well, yes, the chameleon is all those colors depending on what he's standing on. He can change colors to disguise himself. And so that was Ramakrishna's way of teaching us, look, God can manifest in any way that Brahman desires, right? Or we can't even talk about things properly at that level. I can't name him, and I can't say that he did something when we talk about the unchanging absolute. But somehow manifestation happens. Only the man who lives under the tree knows the animal's true color. While meditating, I saw images of gods painted on a canvas. How many gods? How many different things, they said. I said to myself, I shall go to the master, and he will explain it all to me. The master, you saw correctly. Yes, God does manifest as all of these things, actually. I mean, you and I are a manifestation of God. We're just not a super powerful one. We're kind of a dim one because we've got a really heavy veil of Maya or egoism that we express through on this planet. So there's a lot of selfishness, a lot of all the stuff that we call human, right? That gets in the way. So the master says, yes, you saw correctly in that dream. It is God manifesting as if painted on a canvas, all these different gods and goddesses. Kedar then says, well, God assumes form for the sake of his devotees. Through ecstatic love, a devotee sees God with form. Dhruva had a vision of the Lord. He said, why don't your earrings move? The Lord said, they'll move if you move them. All right. Well, there's some high Vedanta in that, which I can't suss it out, but I can smell it. I can tell that it's there. But this idea, he does it for us. God manifested as Holy Mother so that I could fall in love with her, so that I could find someone who was worthy, in my mind, of my dedicating my life to, right? He appears to someone as Jesus, as a demonstration of someone that could believe that God loves them to the extent of giving his life for them. He believes in the someone who likes Krishna. There's a romantic feeling of being carried away by this divine lover who plays on the flute of our life, really, playing musical notes in the way that we move and dance through life. And so those people fall in love with God as Krishna. So all these different ways that the divine presents itself to us is for our benefit, because it's through that love that we come to the knowledge of our own self. And it's a very interesting thing in the sense that it really is our own self that the avatar is manifesting, just with a much bigger battery, just a much bigger source of power in there. And through ecstatic love, a devotee sees God. And this is why Ramakrishna says that God is very, very hesitant to give anybody pure love for him. Because he says, when a devotee loves me with that divine love, with that pure love, I'm enslaved to that devotee. I cannot say no to that devotee. Right. And so Ramakrishna says that he doesn't give a whole lot of people that level of love because he's beholden to those who have such a pure love and such a lack of a sense of me and mine going on. And then this idea, why don't your earrings move? And the Lord said they will move if you move them. Right. As I see this or understand this, as I've mentioned, the divine absolute, the absolute unchanging, God in his formless self. And there's so many things illegal in that sentence. Just choke it down for a moment. So God in his absolute unchanging self is a noun. There's no action there because it's perfection. All movement is caused by need, is caused by a sense of lack, a sense of wanting or needing or grabbing, right? All movement comes from that. And so when you have God in his perfection, there is nothing to change. There is nothing loose. Everything is exactly as it should be. It is perfect. It's a wholeness there, right? And then when we enter into Shakti, there's just a little tablet of me and mine that's dropped in to that divine absolute, and it becomes a verb, right? It becomes a verb at that point because that particular is unnatural and causes manifestation, causes the universe, as it were. Now, we don't know where that first tablet of me and mine came from or how it happened. It's inexplicable, but we see it described in many of the traditions of the world in that same way. And so when God acts, that is the personal God. So when God steps into the creation, as it were, to become a part of his own self, he's stepping into himself as a subset of himself and acts in the world, moves in the world. And so here he's saying, why don't your earrings move? Well, that's because he's representing the divine, unchanging absolute there. And he says, but you can move them. Why? Because you are the one that inspires God to form, right? And you are the verb of God. And so you can obey the will of God. You can dance with the divine. You can manifest God. And that's what all of us are doing. And that's the whole purpose of life, actually, is to know who you are and then to manifest that with that knowledge, that truth, that reality, to manifest pure love, to manifest pure wisdom, and to do it through a constant sense of being, never pulled out of the moment, right? The only real thing. And so that's what life is. Life is you expressing your divinity through your clearest channel possible, right? The master. One must accept everything, God with form and God without form. While meditating in the Kali temple, I noticed Ramani, a prostitute. I said, Mother, I see that you are in that form too. Therefore, I say one must accept everything. One does not know when or how God will reveal himself. Now, this is a very interesting idea here, that God has become everything. Yes, a prostitute. We just use prostitutes because that's the one many people are most judgment about. You could say a gay person. You could say any of these manifestations that are quite touchy for some people. But it is all God. And that's the highest truth that is to be attained in this world, is that God is present everywhere. in all things and is always perfect. And so when we abuse people for their qualities, we're abusing the divine. And so it's very important not to do that, to see God first in everyone, right? And then act accordingly. And that helps bring the world to a higher consciousness. When you look at someone and you see their highest nature and you talk to and treat them as that highest nature, they will be changed. They will feel that love and that respect, and they will be moved forward in a beautiful way. If you hold their weaknesses against them or their attributes against them, you will inhibit that, especially if they see you as standing between them and the divine, right? Then you discourage their moving, their going forward. And so we learn, we do our very best to see God in one another, to lift each other up, to always be encouraging, always be positive, always be helpful, and always be without ego. That's the goal. Where we're at doesn't matter. Just go forward. Don't think about where you're at, because then you reinforce bad samskaras. When you describe yourself, you create a narrative that you have to follow. And so don't bother to describe yourself. Keep your eyes on God. Know that whatever the situation is, grace will take care of it. You, in your sincerity and earnestness, go forward. Do the best you can. Leave it to the mother. She's cleaning you up, right? All right. Anybody have a question about that or a concern?
Yeah, actually did the raise hand
Yes.
emoji. What you said about seeing God in the other,
Uh-huh.
I think, doesn't it feels to me that first has to apply to seeing God in ourselves, because
Yes.
the inner talk is all that really creates the world that you inhabit, right? And if you are not
Absolutely.
seeing, yeah, I'm just recently coming to that recognition, so
Yes,
that
yes. No,
resonated.
no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely true. If you change, your universe changes.
Mm.
We all are not inhabiting the same universe, right? We are all inhabiting our own universe. We all are using the same universal mind to do our thinking and our being, but our egoism has set a little boundary in that universal mind. So this section of the universal mind is all I believe I have access to, and so that's all I can access. And Raja Yoga is very much, if you read Raja Yoga, it plays a lot with that idea, because many of the siddhis, the gifts, the spiritual powers that a person can have kind of demonstrate that. You know, Ramakrishna or Vivekananda says, if you want to learn to read someone's mind, all you have to do is still your section of the universal mind, your egoistic section, still that to as quiet as possible. And then the ripples of the people who are near you in their section of the universal mind, their thought waves will wave right through your calm ocean, and you'll be able to hear what they're thinking, right? And so
And a vritti in another mind flowing into your mind is going to cause it's the same vritti if your mind is still enough.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so because it's there's only one mind, right? And that mind is everything. When that mind is pure, we call it Brahman. When that mind is me and mine infected, we call it Shakti, right?
Mm-hmm.
We call it the manifestation, the power of God, right?
Thank you.
So in the temple, I noticed Ramani, a prostitute, and I say, Mother, I see that you are that form too. Therefore, I say, one must accept everything, right? This is the thing. We all have to accept one another as we come, right? And we respect maybe not the activities of that person, but we respect the divinity in that person. And Kailash is exactly right. The way to see that is to find it in yourself, because you do not have access to anybody else's mind or person, and you have no evidence that they actually are a separate person from you, if you want to get oovy groovy on it, right? They exist in the same dream that you're existing in. And so who is the dreamer of this dream? It's God. And God's unique power is that when he dreams, he can become every person in the dream. He can be 1,000 points of reference in that dream, and that's what he's doing now. He's dreaming, and all you and I are all his manifestation in this dream of his. And he has attached to the thought of us. That's what gives us his Satchitananda to manifest and to become powers of. So he is attached to us how? As himself. That's the loop that causes manifestation. Awareness being aware of itself, God being aware of himself. And so when you and I realize God, we don't actually realize God because we are not real. We are just a thought in the mind of God. And when we realize we're a resolved thought, a thought that has run to its conclusion, a thought that has manifested the love, wisdom, and being that it is naturally in its fullness. And then God detaches from that experiment, right? And all of this is metaphorical, but God is doing 1 billion experiments at a time. What do I look like when I'm manifested through those conditions? What does pure love and pure wisdom and pure being look like when it's pressed through the mind and body of a prostitute, when it's pressed through the mind and body of a sage, when it's pressed through the mind and body of an American? So it's all a grand experiment. And so every one of us are a single line in the book of the love of God, right? And so when our life is finished, we put a period. When we realize God, we put a period on that. And that line says, this is what love looks like when manifesting or pushed through, shining through this set of limitations. And when that limitations comes to its fullness, this is how it advances and comes to that understanding. And then it's boom, it's gone. God withdraws the attachment. We no longer have Satchitananda. This form falls away, and we become aware that we were always that we were the dreamer and not the dreamed, right? In that sense. So the master sings after saying, he says, yes, after saying that, he says, a mendicant has come to us, ever absorbed in divine moods. Right? So a song about God as manifesting as a mendicant. A mendicant, someone who lives everywhere. It's kind of a different way of thinking of homelessness. It's not that you're homeless. When God appears as a homeless person, he's not homeless. The whole world is his home. He's everywhere at home. And so a mendicant, that's why it's one of his favorite manifestations, is someone who doesn't have a place and a particular to live in. Quite often, he's always on the move. Jesus wandered. Ramakrishna had a temple place, but not really he wandered less, but he was not defined by those things. So he's singing that song, and Vijay says, God has infinite power. Can he not reveal himself in any form he chooses? Man is a speck of dust, and he dares come to a conclusion about God. How amazing, right? And so you can see even there, when we talk about God, we're going to talk about God from the point that we understand ourselves. So Vijay here still sees God very much as this third party to himself, and is talking about what God can be, and then says we're just pieces of dust, right? Because he believes himself to have an existence separate from God, and in his humility he's like, well, we must just be barely dust, and God will be like the sun, or the solar system, who knows, like that, right? But he's allowing and saying, but God is God, and so he could be a piece of dust, he can be the moon, he can be a star, he can be whatever he wants to be. So Master says, a man reads a little of the Gita, the Bhagavata, or the Vedanta, and thinks that he has understood everything. He said, once an ant went to a hill of sugar. 1 grain of sugar filled its stomach, and it was returning home with another grain in its mouth. On the way, it said to itself, the next time I go, I shall bring home the entire hill. Right? And this is so true. I mean, I told you that story that my first 6 months in the monastery, I thought it was going to be a good idea for me to write a book, right? And so I told Swami, I'm going to write a book. And Swami is very gracious. He picked his napkin up very gently, wiped his lips off because he would never talk through a dirty mouth. set the napkin down, turned to me, looked at me, smiled, and says, "That will be very good." Right? And enough of a pause for me to believe it, feel good about myself. And then he says, "But perhaps you should wait until you have something to say." Right? And this is the way it is. Religious people, for whatever reason, as spiritual people, we always think we know. It's the real bane of being spiritual or being religious in this world, is we somehow have this tendency to get smug and holier than thou. And it's something to really watch. That's egoism joined with religion, which is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to you. And this is why I say to be very, very cautious not to let this develop in you, that you know something, or that somehow you're special to God, or that somehow you've got it together, or you know the truth, or your religion is the way, or whatnot. Because the reason that it is so dangerous is that if you get that developing in yourself, all of the tools that are meant to break down ego will not work if you have used them to create ego. And you get yourself in a very, very difficult situation. And usually God has to step in and step on you. Step on you like a bug and remind you that you're a mosquito. All right? But just be careful, because it's a real tendency, and you can see it in every temple and every church and every mosque and every house of worship. You will find that group of people that has attached that identity to their ego, and it's very damaging to them, to the people around them, and certainly not a great look for religion at all. All right, chapter 30, the Master in Various Moods. Thursday, October 2nd, 1884. Sri Ramakrishna is sitting in his room at Dakshineshwar. Latu and Ramlal and Harish and Hazra are living with him at the temple garden. Baburam spent a day or two with him now and then. This is what I love, and this was so much my dream for the Colorado Center there, was you see that Ramakrishna was there, and always, I mean, look at the gospel, there were always people coming and spending a couple of days at the temple, living there with him, just to learn. They were all householders, of course, some of them, they were all householders at the time. And so they were always making time to go and spend real quality time. It wasn't like they would just go and, do their punch card, work for an hour, and then head out and leave. This was their heart and life. They fell in love with Thakur because he was amazing, right? And they would go and spend days at a time just to be in his presence, just to learn from him. And so this is why Ramakrishna says to us, if you really want to do this, if you really are interested in knowing your nature, every now and then take some time, as much time as you can manage, he says, to go away, be by yourself, get away from your family, away from your friends, leave your phone at home, leave your computer at home, and just go off into the wilderness somewhere just to be with God every now and then, right? And to do it as often as you can. Because there's a real benefit to getting out of the world of right angles, of ego, right? The cities and the towns and the noise and the occurrences that make you think all of these narratives are true, because everybody's running a narrative. But when you get out into the woods and it's quiet and very, very peaceful, just somehow God, that's the original temple. That's the temple that the divine built for itself. And so when you get off into the wilderness like that, get away from what ego has done to the planet and go back to what God did with the planet, everything is a lesson. Everything is an inspiration. Everything is peaceful. Everything is a strength, right? It's just this wonderful majesty, wonderful unfolding of God. And so take that time, whenever you can, to get off by yourself for a day, if you can manage, for half a day, if that's all you can manage, for an hour, if that's all you can manage. Just go out and spend some focused, purposed time to be quiet in the presence, and to walk in the presence and to look at everything around you as manifestation of that presence, and talk to the trees, say hi to the flowers for me, touch a bug kindly, you know. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in his room. Manilal, Malik, Priya Mukherjee, and his relative Hari, a bearded Brahmo devotee from Shibpur, and several Marwari devotees from Calcutta were in the master's room. So you see, you got people from all over the place. He had always a very diverse crowd in that room, from different religions. You know, he had prostitutes in there, he had gurus in there, he had wandering sadhus in there, he had young boys in there, he had old women in there, right? All of these people coming and all of them sitting together and learning, going forward. Marwari devotees from Calcutta were in the master's room. Manilal was an old member of the Brahmo Samaj. Master, to Manilal and the others, it is wise to salute a person mentally. What need is there of touching his feet? Mental salutation doesn't embarrass anybody. I want to wear a t-shirt that says this everywhere that I go, right? There is no need, you know, and there's no rule. I'm not saying a rule here, but the problem is that that is such an ostentatious thing to do, to bow down in public and take the dust of someone's feet. I mean, to do that purely is extremely difficult. To do that sincerely is even more difficult, right? And so Swami Prabhupada, it was a big deal for me, and I'll say why it's a big deal for me. It was a big deal for me because my first time into a temple, right, in the San Francisco Center, when I got back from India, and the first time I walked in there, and great lecture by Swami Prabhupada. I was with Philip, and after the lecture was over, we got up and we went and walked up to meet the Swami. You know, I hadn't been there before to meet him. And in front of me, there was a young family, a young Indian family. And when they got to Swami, they all laid down on the floor and touched his feet with their hands. Now, I had never seen this before in my life. There was nowhere for me to put that information. And it was shocking. As an American, you know, we thought we got rid of our kings 250 years ago. And, you know, then we basically degraded everybody down to the lowest possible form. And now we're a democracy. But I didn't have anywhere to put it. So I turned around and walked out, and Philip came running after me. He says, "Where are you going?" He says, I told him, and I was sincere. I said, "I don't know what that was. I don't know what that was about. But in my world, there is never a good reason for another man to lay on his face in front of another person. People are people. You don't have to degrade yourself to show respect. You know, you just treat the person nicely and listen to them if you want to show respect." And that was my world, you know, growing up here. And if Philip hadn't been there, I would never have gone back in there, because I would have been very much of the mind that's a cult, because that's how people in a cult treat their leaders in Western culture. There would have been no question in my mind at all. But Philip, you know, he says, hey, don't, you're totally misunderstanding it. He says the children in India do that to their parents. They do it to their teachers. Anybody that you show respect, that's how they do it. It doesn't mean anything more than that. It's almost a form of a greeting. It's so common. And so he kind of walked me through it, and I went back in and went up and shook Swami's hand. But that left a mark on me, and I thought, well, gosh, why, you know, I almost didn't make it because of such a silly thing. And it was silly on my part. But you know, for the first timer, you can't really blame the first timer, right, for that. And so I used to have many conversations with Swami, and he said that when he got there, he tried and tried and tried to prevent the devotees from taking the dust of his feet. And he said, at some point, I just gave up. He said, "What can I do?" He says, I tell them that it's better that they do that in the office, you know, if they want to come and take pranams, or the monastery. right? But not to do it in the general public, right? I remember the first time I went to Germany to give when they came to pick me up at the airport in Frankfurt, in the Frankfurt airport. Oh my goodness, I did not know what to make of it. They came and they were all laying on the ground and taking the dust of my feet, and they'd brought a big bouquet of flowers that they were, handing to me. Each person had a few, they were handing them to me, and I was just like, oh my goodness gracious, what is this? What is this display going on in the Frankfurt airport? And especially me. I mean, at that time, I wasn't even a year old as a sannyasin, as a swami. And so it's just like, oh my Lord, help me to digest this. And so you don't have to take anything away from that. I just put all of that out there as a pool of information for understanding why some of this is an issue, and why sometimes it is, and why sometimes it's not, and blah, 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 blah. And why some swamis will not let you take the dust of their feet, and some swamis don't care, and some swamis demand it. Really. The whole gamut is there, and it will always be there, and we'll all be fine. But understand this is just the reason that there's struggle around it, and sometimes issues around it. So the master, it is wise to salute a person mentally. What need is there of touching his feet? Mental salutation doesn't embarrass anybody. The attitude that my religion alone is right and all other religions are false is not good. I see that God himself has become all of these, men, images, and salagram. I see one alone in all of these. I do not see two, I see only one. Many people think that their opinion alone is right and other opinions are wrong. What they alone have won and others have lost. But a person who has gone forward may be detained by some slight obstacle, and someone who has been lagging behind may then steal a march on him. In the game of Golok Dham, one may advance a great deal, but still somehow one's peace may fail to reach the goal. Right? And so he's basically saying, be humble. Don't think yourself advanced. Right? Like Holy Mother said, you do not know the value of a monk until he's 3.5 pounds of ashes. Right? You do not know, because that pride itself can bring you down, can cause a great fall. And, Swami gave me that. Remember that time I got caught in the coffee shop? Swami went away to India for 5 weeks, and I was walking, and I decided to go in and get a cup of coffee at a little cafe on Polk Street. And I was sitting there watching everybody go by, and I saw a nun go by. I didn't think she saw me. But boy, when Swami got back, she was in his office faster than I could snap, telling him that while he was away, one of his monks was seen in a coffee house. Well, he only had one monk, so it was me that got called to the office, right? And he gave me a little lecture. He says, see, it's not a big deal that you had coffee. He says, but understand your samskaras await you when you go into a place like that. You do not know who else is there, and you don't know what will be awakened within yourself. He says, so it's not our ideal to go out for pleasure. He says, if you have to go out for food because you're traveling, no problems. He said, but if you have the possibility of not doing it, it is wiser to not do it. And that was all he said. And that was that. But see, this is the thing. Always be on guard. Where we've never, just be on guard. That's all. Why say anything else? It is all by grace and all by the love of God. But stay in a place where you know you need that. All right. We'll stop there for today.